Hi there, in today's video we're going to be looking at some mixed trigonometry examples where we will have to work on selecting the right rule. So trigonometry works a little bit like factorising at exam level. So for example, in factorising, a question would just say factorise and then give you something to factorise. They wouldn't tell you how to factorise, they wouldn't tell you one of the three ways which one you'd have to use. And trigonometry works like that as well. So on a question would just say find the missing angle or missing side. However, they would not tell us which rule to use. Okay. The good thing, however, for us is we are given the rules on the formula sheet. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what your formula sheet, what would look like. So you can see here that the first thing that comes up is the sine rule. Okay, now I did state in my previous video that the sine rule is only written one way with the lowercase letters on top. But remembering you can write it as sine A over A equals sine B over B equals sine C over C if your task was to find an angle. Okay, so this one you would use for finding a length because the lengths are on top, the lowercase letters. You would flip them all over and use this one to work out a missing angle because the capital letters are on the top. Okay, however, they wouldn't write that on the formula sheet. You just need to know that you can flip this one to get that one there. Okay, they then show us the two cosine rules. Okay, so the first one here is for finding a length. Okay, so lowercase letter a there, or finding an angle. You would rewrite it as cos A equals there. Okay, so that's the one for finding an angle. The other formula that you've seen is for area of a triangle formula, and you would get given that in the exam as well. Okay, so remember the area is half of AB multiplied by sine of the angle C. Okay, so that's what equations you'd be given in the formula sheet. Okay, what we would then have to do is work out from the question which one we would need to use in order to do that. And that's what we're going to practice a bit of just now. Okay, my best way of thinking about this is think of it like certain categories. So if a question involves area or asks us to find the area, then we will need to use the following. Okay, and that's the area of a triangle formula. Okay, so if the question gives you the area of a triangle and asks you to work something out, or if it asks you to work out the area, then we need to use that formula there. Okay, there'd be a good point in the video, folks, to make sure you're pausing this so that you can write down these categories with the formulas beside them as a note. Okay, now these notes are not in your pack, okay, that you're given. What I would do is either write all this on the back page of one of your trigonometry note slides, or write this into a jotter for you to put in at a later date. Okay, but make sure you're writing this down. So the first category is if a question involves area or asks us to find the area, then we use that formula. If we're asked to find a missing side, then we have two possibilities. We have the sine rule, okay, with the lowercase letters right on top, so A over sine A equals B over sine B equals C over sine C. Or we have the cosine rule, a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos a. Both formulas work out a missing side. However, depending on the triangle we've got, depends on which formula which will work, which one we'll need to use. Okay, and similarly, if we're wanting to find a missing angle, then we've got two choices. We've got the flipped version of the sine rule, so the capital letters on the top, that works out a missing angle, or we have the cosine rule that we've got written there. Okay, so that's what we are faced with. Okay, those three categories. Okay, so make sure you paused the video and wrote down those three categories with the rules underneath. But also we have choices in those categories. So for example, if it's a missing side, which one do we use? Do we use the sine rule? Do we use the cosine rule? If it's a missing angle, do we use the flipped version of the sine rule, or do we use the changed version of the cosine rule in order to do that? Okay, we're going to look at a couple of examples to show you. So with trigonometry, the first thing we always do is we work out what type this question is asking us. So this is asking us to find the length of PQ. Okay, so it's a missing side question. Okay, they want us to find the length. So I've got my two formulas from above written down below so that I know it's going to be one of these two rules I'm going to use. The question is, which rule am I going to use? The first thing we do, and the first thing you always do with a trigonometry question, is you finish labeling the triangle. Okay, and that's going to help us work out which formula, and that's why we do this. Okay, so we've got our capital letters P, Q, and R at our angles. Okay, so opposite angle P will be length P, so length P is going to be there. I know length P. Opposite angle Q is going to be length Q, and opposite angle R is length R. Okay, now once I've labelled it, I've then got two choices. I've got the sine rule or the cosine rule, and only one's going to work. My advice, always try the cosine rule first. Okay, if you try the cosine rule first and it works, then you found the right one. If it didn't work, then you know it's a sine rule question. Okay, and the reason why I say try a cosine rule question first is because you need a lot of data for the cosine rule. Therefore, it's easier to spot if it's going to work or not first. Okay, so do that one first. So you'll see the cosine rule written down there: a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos a. I'm going to rewrite this using p, q's and r's. Okay, now my length that they want me to find is the length of p to q, which I've labelled as r. So if I rewrite this, it's going to be r squared equals p squared plus q squared, okay, my other two sides that I've got, minus two lots of, now I'm not going to put my brackets in just yet, okay, because I want to see what it works with the numbers. So it'll be times 2p q cos of the angle r. Okay, so all you'll see I've done there is I've swapped the rp's and q's for my a, b's and c's that the formula gave me. Okay, and now I want to check if I've got the information I need to work out r squared. Okay, so r squared means I need to know p squared, which I know because I know p is 9, so I can work out what that is squared. It means I need to know what q is, length q, which is 13. I can do that as well. Then I need to take away two lots of p and q. I can do that, and then cos of the angle r. And I've got all those things. Okay, I've got the angle r as well. So I've checked that this formula will work. Okay, and if you even are still unsure if this one will work, let's put the numbers in now. Okay, so r squared, there's my cursor, r squared, p squared, that's going to be 9 squared, plus q squared, that's 13 squared. Take away, mind your brackets when you do these questions, 2 times p, which is 9, times q, which is 13, multiplied by cos of the angle, which is at r 25 degrees. Okay, so now you can see that I had all the numbers I needed in order to use the cosine rule. Okay, so if I tried the sine rule, I wouldn't have had all the information. It wouldn't have given me the right opportunity to work out the length of PQ, which is R for us. Okay, cosine rule works. I've managed to put my numbers in. Okay, we're going to complete this question now. So putting all this into my calculator, if you do that correctly, you should get R squared equals 37.9239. Continued. That's R squared. We want R, which is length of PQ, so that's going to be the square root of 37.9239. Continued. And if you put in your calculator, you get 6.1582. Continued. Again, if you round a bit early there, your number will change from mine. I've managed to keep all my numbers in my calculator. And if you round that to 2 decimal places, you should get R equals 6.16 meters. Okay. So there's an example of a question asking you to find the missing length. We look at our formula sheet. We've got two possible ways of working it out. Only one will work. My advice, always try the cosine rule first. Okay, and if it's not the cosine rule, then you know by all likely it will be the sine rule. Okay, but the reason why we try the cosine rule, as I said before, you need a lot of data to do it. So if you try and put your data in and see if it works, you're hopefully seeing that you can have all the pieces of information that I had when trying to work this out. Okay, we're going to move on to a second example now where it's going to be a missing angle. We've got two possibilities. We'll see how that works there. Okay, but make sure you've copied all that down before moving on. So example 2, we've got another triangle PQ and R, and my job is to work out the angle X, okay, situated in that bottom corner. Again, before we work this out, calculate the angle X, let's label a triangle. So opposite side angle P is length P, opposite angle R is length R, opposite angle Q is length Q. And I've got two opportunities, or two possibilities I should say. I've got sine A, or the sine rule with the capital letters flipped, okay? Or I've got the cosine rule for finding an angle, cos A equals B squared plus C squared minus A squared over 2BC. Again, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to try the cosine rule. Now, my angle that I want to find is X, and that's situated at R. So if I write this for R, so it's going to be cos of R, that's going to equal P squared plus Q squared minus R squared all over 2 times P times q. So that's what the cosine rule would look like for us. We're going to try and put our data in now. So cos of r, that's going to equal p squared, that's going to be 8.5 squared, plus q squared, and you can see from my triangle I don't know what q squared is. Okay, so at this point it doesn't work, it falls down. Okay, I haven't got the information to put into my formula because I don't know what q is. So therefore I've checked the cosine rule, it doesn't work here. Therefore the rule I should be using must be the sine rule. Okay, so I'm going to write that as sine of p over p equals sine of q over q equals sine of r over r. And I'm going to go back to my diagram, and when we do these questions we tick what we know and what we want to find out. Okay, so I know the angle at P is 44, so I can tick that. I know my length of P is 8.5. I also want to find out my angle at R. I don't know my angle at Q, not interested in that. And I know my length of R is 11, but I don't know the length of Q. So I'm going to use the P's and the Q's part for my sine rule. So putting in your data, sine of P, that's going to be over P equals sine of R over R. That's going to be sine of 44, and the length of P was 8.5. That's going to equal sine of R, which is x, over the length of R, which is 11 meters. Okay, I'm going to do the rest of my working over here. My advice, swap them round so that you've got the x part on the left hand side. So I'm just going to swap them over so that we can have it written a bit nicer for us. I'm then going to bring this 11 that I don't want on this side over to the other side and multiply so that we can work out what sine of x is. It's going to be sine of 44 over 8.5. Then it's going to multiply by my number that I've came across, which is 11. Okay, hopefully you remember doing this part when you practice the sine rule. So sine of x, if you do that into your calculator, you should get the answer 0.8989. ... Wouldn't round at this point because we want to work out what x is. That was my angle, so we need to get rid of the sine by doing sine inverse of 0.8989. That means we get the answer 64.0229 continued, round to 2 decimal places, 64.02. So my x angle was 64.02 degrees, so almost 64 degrees exact. So there you are, there's 2 examples where we would be given that in a test or an exam. We would not know which rule to use, so we have to work out what the rule is. Okay, so I'm just going to show you my checklist one more time. There's the key bit to make sure you've got that copied down. So if you've got a question that involves area, you have the area of a triangle rule. Okay, bit easier to spot. If we're asked to find a missing side, then we've got the sine rule and the cosine rule written there. And if we want to find a missing angle, we've also got a sine rule and a cosine rule for a missing angle. Okay, my advice, always check the cosine rule first. If it works, if you've got the right data for it, then it's a cosine question. If it doesn't work, for example, when we tried it for example 2 using the missing angle formula for the cosine rule, we didn't have all the sides we needed, therefore it had to become a sine rule question. Okay, remember when you're trying these exercises today, you might end up getting stuck with working out what it is. Okay, that's the bit that's new for us today, that takes a bit of practice. Please make sure you're asking for help if you come across that. Okay, thanks for listening.